Right now, as you're watching this video, someone you care about is actively choosing to ignore your messages, avoiding your calls, and pretending you don't exist. They're not busy. They're not overwhelmed. They're not dealing with personal issues. The brutal truth is, they've made a calculated decision that you're simply not worth their time or attention. And here's the part that will disturb you the most. This isn't happening by accident. There's a dark psychological mechanism at work, one that Niccolo Machiavelli understood over 500 years ago, and once you understand it, you'll never see human relationships the same way again. Before we dive deep into this psychological rabbit hole, make sure to hit that like button if you're ready to face some uncomfortable truths about human nature, and subscribe because we're about to explore the darkest corners of social psychology that most people are too afraid to discuss. Let me start with a question that will make you uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how the same person who ignores your thoughtful messages will instantly respond to someone else's casual text? Have you witnessed someone who claims they're too busy to spend time with you suddenly make hours available for another person? This isn't coincidence. This is selective attention in its purest form, and it's driven by psychological principles that Machiavelli identified as the foundation of all human power dynamics. Machiavelli wrote in The Prince that people are generally ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, and covetous. But here's what he understood that most people miss. Humans don't ignore others randomly. Ignoring someone is actually a sophisticated psychological weapon, a form of social control that serves multiple purposes simultaneously. When someone ignores you, they're not just being rude, they're exercising power, establishing dominance, and conditioning your behavior to serve their interests. The first principle of Machiavellian psychology that explains why people ignore you is what I call the scarcity manipulation principle. Machiavelli understood that people value what they cannot easily obtain. When someone ignores you, they're artificially creating scarcity around their attention. Think about it. The harder someone is to reach, the more you want to reach them. The less available they are, the more valuable their time seems. This isn't accidental behavior, it's a subconscious power play designed to increase their perceived value while decreasing yours. Consider this scenario. Two people are interested in the same romantic prospect. Person A is always available, responds immediately to messages, and makes themselves completely accessible. Person B takes hours to respond, sometimes doesn't respond at all, and maintains an air of mystery about their availability. Which person do you think the romantic prospect will find more attractive? Machiavelli would tell you that person B has instinctively understood that attention given too freely becomes worthless, while attention that must be earned becomes precious. But here's where it gets psychologically darker. The people who ignore you aren't just trying to make themselves seem more valuable. They're actively devaluing you in the process. Every time they choose not to respond to your message while responding to others, every time they're unavailable for you while being available for someone else, they're sending a clear psychological message. You are not a priority. You are not valuable enough to warrant their immediate attention. You exist in their social hierarchy, but you exist at the bottom. This brings us to the second Machiavellian principle, the hierarchy establishment protocol. Machiavelli understood that all human relationships exist within power hierarchies, and ignoring someone is one of the most effective ways to establish your position above them in that hierarchy. When someone consistently ignores you, they're not just being inconsiderate, they're training you to accept a lower position in their social ecosystem. Here's how this psychological manipulation works on a neurological level. When someone ignores you, your brain interprets this as a threat to your social standing. This triggers your stress response system, flooding your body with cortisol and creating an intense desire to restore the social connection. The person ignoring you knows this, whether consciously or subconsciously. They understand that their silence creates anxiety in you, and that anxiety makes you more likely to chase their attention, more likely to accommodate their needs, and more likely to accept whatever scraps of attention they're willing to give you. If you're feeling uncomfortable right now, good. That discomfort is your mind recognizing patterns you've experienced but never fully understood. And if you're finding this analysis valuable, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're just getting started with these dark psychological truths. The third principle is what Machiavelli would recognize as the investment asymmetry strategy. People ignore you because they've calculated, often subconsciously, that they can maintain your interest and investment in the relationship without reciprocating that investment. This is psychological economics at its most brutal. They've determined that you will continue to pursue them, continue to value them, and continue to invest emotional energy in the relationship, even when they give you nothing in return. Think about your own relationships right now. Are there people in your life who you consistently reach out to, but who rarely initiate contact with you? Are there individuals who you make time for, but who are perpetually too busy when you need them? These aren't balanced relationships. These are psychological power exchanges where you're consistently giving more than you're receiving. And the reason they continue this pattern is simple. It works. You keep investing, so they keep taking. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved, but what he really understood was that it's best to be needed. The people who ignore you have figured out that they don't need to give you consistent attention to maintain your investment in them. They've trained you to accept less, to be grateful for minimal effort, and to interpret their occasional attention as something special rather than something you deserve. This psychological conditioning is incredibly insidious because it happens gradually. The person doesn't start by completely ignoring you. That would be too obvious, and you might walk away. Instead, they slowly reduce their responsiveness, gradually decrease their availability, and incrementally lower their investment in the relationship. By the time you realize what's happening, you've already accepted this new normal. You've been psychologically conditioned to expect less and be grateful for whatever attention you receive. The fourth Machiavellian principle at work here is the control through unpredictability doctrine. Machiavelli understood that predictable behavior gives others power over you, while unpredictable behavior keeps others off balance and seeking your approval. The people who ignore you aren't consistently unresponsive. That would actually give you clarity and might motivate you to move on. Instead, they're strategically inconsistent. Sometimes they respond immediately and enthusiastically. Sometimes they take days to respond with minimal effort. Sometimes they ignore you completely. This unpredictable pattern creates what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, which is the most addictive form of behavioral conditioning. Just like a gambling addict who keeps playing because the next pull might be the jackpot, you keep investing in these relationships because the next interaction might be the one where they finally give you the attention you crave. Share this video with someone who needs to understand these psychological dynamics, because recognition is the first step toward liberation from these manipulative patterns. But here's where Machiavellian psychology gets even more disturbing. The people who ignore you often do care about you on some level, but they've learned that caring without consequences is a position of weakness. They've discovered that maintaining your interest while minimizing their investment gives them maximum power with minimum risk. They can have you available whenever they need emotional support, validation, or assistance without having to reciprocate or commit to your needs in return. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote about the importance of being both a lion and a fox. The lion represents strength and directness, but the fox represents cunning and manipulation. The people who ignore you are being the fox. They're using subtle psychological manipulation to maintain power in the relationship without appearing overtly aggressive or cruel. The fifth principle is the attention economy maximization theory. In our modern world, attention has become the ultimate currency. Everyone wants it, everyone needs it, but everyone only has a limited supply to give. The people who ignore you have figured out how to maximize the value they extract from their attention while minimizing what they invest. They've turned their attention into a scarce resource that others compete for, rather than something they freely distribute. Consider social media as a perfect example of this dynamic. The people who ignore your messages will often post stories and updates that they know you'll see. They're not actually too busy to communicate. They're strategically choosing how to distribute their attention for maximum psychological impact. They want you to see that they're active and engaged, but they want you to understand that this engagement isn't available to you without meeting their unstated conditions. These unstated conditions are crucial to understand. The person ignoring you isn't necessarily doing it out of malice. They're doing it because you haven't demonstrated sufficient value to warrant their immediate attention. In their psychological framework, responding quickly to you would signal that you're important to them, which would give you power in the relationship. By making you wait, by making you wonder, by making you chase, they maintain the upper hand. The sixth Machiavellian principle is the emotional labor inequality establishment. Machiavelli understood that relationships are fundamentally about power exchanges, and emotional labor is one of the most significant forms of power in human relationships. When someone ignores you, they're forcing you to do all the emotional labor in the relationship. You're the one who has to reach out, you're the one who has to maintain the connection, you're the one who has to deal with the anxiety and uncertainty their behavior creates. Meanwhile, they get to remain emotionally detached and comfortable. They don't have to worry about the relationship because they know you're doing all the work to maintain it. They don't have to deal with rejection because they're not the one initiating contact. They don't have to manage relationship anxiety because they're not the one being ignored. This is a profoundly unequal distribution of emotional labor, and it serves their psychological interests perfectly. If this analysis is hitting close to home, make sure you're subscribed and hit that like button, because understanding these patterns is essential for protecting your psychological well-being. Here's the part that will really disturb you. The people who ignore you often use your reactions to their ignoring behavior as further justification for continuing to ignore you. If you get upset about being ignored, they'll label you as needy or dramatic. If you ask for more consistent communication, they'll frame you as demanding or high maintenance. If you express hurt about their behavior, they'll characterize you as overly sensitive or emotionally unstable. This is a form of psychological gaslighting where your normal human need for reciprocal communication and respect is pathologized and used against you. They've created a no-win situation where responding to their ignoring behavior in any way becomes evidence that you deserve to be ignored. This is Machiavellian psychology at its most sophisticated and cruel. The seventh principle is what I call the social proof manipulation strategy. People who ignore you aren't just affecting your relationship with them, they're influencing how others perceive and treat you. When others see that someone ignores you, doesn't prioritize you, or treats you as optional, it signals to them that you're someone who can be safely disregarded. This creates a cascading effect where being ignored by one person makes you more likely to be ignored by others. Machiavelli understood that social dynamics are heavily influenced by perceived status and value. If others see that you're not valued by someone they consider important, they'll unconsciously lower their estimation of your worth as well. This is why being consistently ignored by someone in your social circle can damage your relationships with others in that same circle. The eighth and perhaps most insidious principle is the learned helplessness installation protocol. Over time, being consistently ignored teaches you to accept less than you deserve in all your relationships. You begin to believe that being ignored is normal, that your needs don't matter, and that you should be grateful for whatever attention others are willing to give you. This learned helplessness extends far beyond the specific person who ignores you and affects how you show up in all your relationships. You start making excuses for others' poor treatment of you. You begin to minimize your own needs and feelings. You develop a tolerance for disrespectful behavior that would have been unacceptable to you before. This is exactly what the person ignoring you wants to achieve, whether they're conscious of it or not. They want you to accept less so they can give less while still maintaining your loyalty and investment. But here's what Machiavelli would tell you about breaking free from these psychological traps. The first step is recognition. Understanding that being ignored is often a deliberate psychological strategy rather than innocent neglect is crucial for protecting yourself. The second step is establishing boundaries. You must be willing to withdraw your attention and investment from people who consistently ignore you, even when it's uncomfortable. The third step is understanding your own psychological vulnerabilities. Why do you continue to pursue people who ignore you? What psychological needs are you trying to meet through these unbalanced relationships? Often, being ignored triggers deep-seated fears of abandonment or unworthiness, and addressing these underlying issues is essential for breaking the cycle. Machiavelli also understood the importance of strategic patience. Don't react emotionally when someone ignores you, because emotional reactions give them power and confirm their strategy is working. Instead, respond strategically by gradually reducing your investment in them while increasing your investment in relationships that are reciprocal and respectful. Remember, attention is indeed a currency, but you get to decide how you spend yours. When you consistently invest your attention in people who ignore you, you're teaching them that ignoring you is profitable. When you redirect that attention to people who value and reciprocate it, you're creating incentives for better treatment. The most powerful thing you can do when someone ignores you is to genuinely stop caring whether they respond or not. This isn't about playing games or trying to manipulate them back. It's about recognizing your own worth and refusing to accept treatment that doesn't reflect that worth. When you truly don't need their validation or attention, their ignoring behavior loses all its psychological power over you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear these truths about human psychology and relationship dynamics. As we conclude this deep dive into the dark psychology of why people ignore you, remember that knowledge is power, but only when you use it to create better boundaries and healthier relationships. The people who ignore you are operating from their own psychological frameworks and insecurities, but understanding their motivations doesn't mean you have to accept their behavior. You deserve relationships where your communication is valued, where your time is respected, and where your emotional investment is reciprocated. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The next time someone ignores you, remember these Machiavellian principles and ask yourself whether this person has earned the privilege of your continued attention and investment. If this video has opened your eyes to psychological patterns you hadn't recognized before, hit that like button, subscribe for more insights into the dark psychology of human relationships. And remember that the strongest psychological position you can hold is genuinely not needing what someone else refuses to give you. That's true power, and that's something Machiavelli would definitely approve of.